This Q&A is from at Samuel_Layton. Why no love for first print Japanese games? Mario and Zelda first came out in Japan, so why aren't WATA and Heritage Auctions, quote, following the flag like in other hobbies, like book collecting? It means like with those first editions.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Or comic books.
When it comes, a lot of times with book collectors, you want the first printing, but you want it in the language it was printed in. So like Little Prince, which is Vani's favorite book. I got her.
Is that Hungary? Where was that? Danish?
It's French.
French? All right.
Yeah. Ideally, at some point she would probably want a first French edition of that.
Sure.
Generally, you follow the flag or the language. Why don't people do that with video games? Because the people who are interested in collecting WATA games are man babies who are interested in repurchasing their youth, and not so much the historical aspect of it. That's my take.
Very nuanced, Ian. I'm going to go a little bit different than that. I don't think they're all there are investors who don't give a shit about video game history.
Yes. Either way you look at it, it's not good.
They don't. If they care about video game history at all, like they claim, they would try to get the Famicom disc version of Legend of Zelda. But the reason they don't is because there's so many more of those out there that are available and easier to get in a more complete form than the fucking cellophane wrapped NES card, so they don't care.
Right.
They can't invest in those.
Right. There is, my answer was meant to sound snooty, but jerky, but
get us in trouble,
there are people who collect, and yes, I understand it. There are people, it's what you remember, so that's what you buy, and
sure,
that's totally fine. But at some point, all the people who want to do all the the huffing and puffing about history and preserving history and stuff like that, you're lying to yourself. If it did, you would be going after the actual historically.
You would get a fucking Donkey Kong cabinet if you cared about the first appearance of Mario.
Right. So
like that's the first appearance of Mario. Get the fucking ROM board and get that graded.
Yeah, it is interesting to me that it does not follow the same thing that books do. That there isn't the
it doesn't follow the first of anything.
No.
Baseball cards, it doesn't follow the first or comic books, it doesn't follow anything.
Video game collecting, and this is something that I've always thought was strange about US video game collecting, but it always seems to be particularly with the NES and the Super Nintendo stuff, the Nintendo stuff, it's all a very US centric view of games. A lot of the collectors don't seem to dip into the Japanese stuff.
Well, because it's foreign to us, literally. It's literally foreign. We wouldn't know where to start necessarily. We weren't exposed to it. How do you find out about games from another country easily? And you couldn't up until YouTube. You'd have to go on a weird forum that Ian's a member of and ask people about PC Engine games. Like, how do you find out about this stuff if you weren't exposed to it?
Sure.
I think I'm trying to think of a scenario where they would want to focus on the actual first game releases of these, and I'm trying to think of one that would benefit them. But again, it comes down to the scarcity is not there. I mean, the scarcity is not there in general because the carts are all available, or even the box version, so they can't monetize that. And like I said, you can't monetize a lot of these first Japanese games. Like they're not worth that much money. They're easier to find in general, a good condition one, because like again, the Famicom they're just a little fucking case with it. That's what you get.
Right.
So it's a little bit easier to get them in complete form. And I guess it doesn't have the same cachet as when I went to Toys R Us. This is how they always try to say. They try to build this fucking fake nostalgia. Which the reason I don't believe it is because if I believed that they would have bought these games 10, 15 years ago when they were not worth anything, not in the past year and a half. Oh, when I went to Toys R Us, that's what I got, Ian. When I went to, I got that. Do I think about like pristine condition GI Joes I play with? I guess. but it's not something that I'm drawn to. Like, why are you drawn to it for video games versus anything else? Like, I never understood that. And that goes back to my arguments on Nintendo Age. I never understood. And I always said, even then, this is not video game collecting. This is something different. This is a weird like third cousin of game collecting at most. To me, I think I likened it to like people that collected like unopened bottles of fucking Coca-Cola from the 50s or something.
Because you're not at that point, it doesn't so much resemble video game collecting because you're not playing. It's when collecting is the hobby itself.
Yeah, closer. I guess it's more.
You find what's hot and what's interesting at that point in time that has a scene around it, and you collect that because it gives you something to talk about and something to buy and something to hold on to and something to look for, something to lord over someone else. I don't know, but at that point, you're collecting to collect. It's not so much the object. It's just.
Well, you're always collecting an object, right?
Well, you are, but I'm just saying it doesn't. It's not so much that it's video games or comic books. It's that it's
the focus shifts.
Something desirable that you can collect a set of.
The focus shifts from the commodity itself to totally just the condition of the commodity.
Yeah, the condition and the rarity.
The condition comes to the forefront, and the game becomes secondary, if that makes sense. Because the people that will buy sealed games for trash games, they'll buy just because of the condition. And for comic books, people don't do that. For baseball cards, people don't do that. They don't say, I'm going to buy that 87, Mark McGwire Topps rookie card that's pristine. It's not worth, like, there's no reason to do that. Like, there's no reason to do that. That was a bad example. Mark McGwire rookie card might have been worth something at some point. I'm going to get that pristine condition, I don't know, Willie Randolph card. He was a decent player on the Yankees. Like, the condition becomes what drives you more so than what is being conditioned or what is being graded, we'll just say.
Sure.
And for video games, it's the weirdest distortion of that I have seen versus comic books, versus even toys, versus anything else that has any sort of pop culture, aspect to it. So, that's why there's no love for those games. That's why there isn't. Obviously, you can have someone come along with a lot of money, try to buy up those things. Maybe listen to this and be like, oh, I'm going to go buy that stuff just in case. And all it takes is, again, it takes like a handful of people to try to drum up interest. All it takes is, what really pushed this was when a year ago, there was a couple of articles, two articles put out about this shit. And I didn't agree with the slant of a couple of the articles because it promoted as pie in the sky stuff. And then that allows some more people to come in. And you get a very bullish market out there. That people have already lost money. Some people have made money, but a lot of people are going to lose money in the long term. Look at the Atari shit. That's a big time loser. But even on some of these NES games, there's going to be a lot of losers for sure. Especially the complete in box stuff that's been happening the past 3-4 months. To me is insane.